The Lost Generation, 1883 to 1900. The Lost Generation grew up at a strange crossroads in history. As kids and teens, they were taught that life followed clear rules. Work hard, believe in progress, trust institutions, and everything would move steadily forward. Society told them that science, industry, and tradition were leading humanity towards something better. Then World War I happened and completely shattered that belief system. Overnight, the rules they'd been promised collapsed under the weight of mass death, mechanized warfare, and global chaos. This generation witnessed one of the most jarring transitions in human history. They saw a world of horse-drawn carts, handwritten letters, and old social hierarchies transform into one filled with tanks, machine guns, and industrial-scale destruction. War no longer felt heroic or noble. It felt pointless and horrifying. Millions died for reasons that felt unclear, and survivors came home deeply changed. For many, the war didn't just end lives, it ended faith in governments, traditions, and the idea that suffering always had meaning. Out of that disillusionment came a new cultural voice, especially in art and literature. Writers like Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Gertrude Stein tried to capture the numbness, confusion, and quiet despair their generation felt. Their work was often spare, reflective, and emotionally heavy, focusing on themes like emptiness, identity, and the search for purpose. This is where the deep, moody writer image comes from. People trying to process a broken world through words, late nights, and intense introspection. At their core, the Lost Generation wasn't lazy or hopeless. They were disappointed. They wanted to believe in something meaningful, but history gave them every reason to doubt. So instead of trusting big promises, they questioned everything. Their legacy is the idea that it's okay to admit the world doesn't make sense and to keep searching for meaning anyway, even if all you have is a typewriter and a lot of thoughts. The Greatest Generation, 1901 to 1927. The Greatest Generation came of age during a time when life didn't offer many safety nets, and complaining wasn't considered useful. As children and young adults, they lived through the Great Depression, when money was scarce, jobs were uncertain, and survival depended on cooperation, creativity, and endurance. For them, hardship wasn't a phase. It was the default setting. You learned to adapt quickly, waste nothing, and keep going no matter how tired you were. Then, just as things began to stabilize, World War II arrived. This generation didn't just watch history happen, they were pulled directly into it. Millions served, worked in factories, rationed food, and reorganized daily life around the global emergency. The experience reinforced a powerful mindset. When something needs to be done, you do it. Fear, doubt, and feelings were luxuries that could be addressed later, if at all. After the war, this same generation helped build what we now think of as the modern world. They constructed highways, expanded cities, created suburbs, and laid the groundwork for long-term economic growth. Stability became the goal. Routine became comforting. Rest was often viewed with suspicion because to them, productivity meant safety. If something broke, you didn't replace it. You fixed it, usually with whatever was nearby and a strong sense of determination. Emotionally, the Greatest Generation was famously reserved. They rarely talked about their inner lives, not because they didn't have failings, but because they didn't believe talking about them would change anything. Strength was shown through action, reliability, and consistency. You showed up, you handled your responsibilities, and somehow, no matter how early the morning, you were awake before sunrise, ready to do it again. Their legacy isn't flash or flare, it's resilience. They believed that problems were meant to be solved, not analyzed endlessly. Even when the odds were bad, their instinct was to push forward and trust that effort would lead somewhere better. The Silent Generation, 1928 to 1945. The Silent Generation grew up in the shadow of enormous events they didn't cause and couldn't control. Many were children during the Great Depression and World War II, watching adults struggle, sacrifice, and worry constantly. From a young age, they learn that drawing attention to yourself, especially in unstable times, could be risky. Safety came from blending in, following rules, and doing what was expected. Because of this, they developed a strong sense of discipline and respect for structure. Manners mattered. Politeness wasn't just social, it was protective. Saying the right thing, writing thank you notes, dressing appropriately, and respecting authority were ways to keep life orderly in a world that had recently been anything but. They believed that if everyone behaved properly, chaos could be kept at bay. Unlike the loud idealism of later generations, the silent generation preferred quiet progress. They didn't like rocking the boat or challenging systems openly. That didn't mean they lacked opinions, far from it. They simply believed disagreement should be private, subtle, and carefully worded. Judgment often came in the form of a raised eyebrow or a perfectly neutral comment that somehow said everything. Emotionally, this generation valued self-control. Big displays of anger, joy, or rebellion were seen as unnecessary and even dangerous. Their special talent was communicating disapproval without ever sounding rude, mastering phrases like, "That's interesting," or, "Well, everyone has their own way," which could shut down a conversation instantly. Their legacy is one of quiet endurance. They believed that stability came from good behavior, patience, and not standing out too much. In their worldview, the path to a good life wasn't through bold disruption, but through keeping your head down, doing the right thing, and trusting that order would reward you eventually. Baby Boomers, 1946 to 1964. Baby boomers were born into a world that finally felt hopeful again. World War II was over, economies were growing, and families were expanding fast, hence the boom. For the first time in a long while, the future seemed bright and full of possibility. Many boomers grew up with steady jobs in their households, new homes and expanding suburbs, and the sense that life was going to keep getting better if you played your cards right. Culturally, this generation was loud, visible, and influential. They grew up alongside television, rock and roll, and mass media, which meant ideas spread faster than ever before. As teenagers and young adults, many boomers questioned authority, protested wars, challenged social norms, and pushed for civil rights and personal freedom. They believed change was not only possible, but necessary. Compared to earlier generations, they were bold, expressive, and unapologetic about wanting something different. Then time passed, and roles shifted. As boomers aged, many of them moved into leadership positions in government, business, education, and culture. The generation that once distrusted institutions became the institutions. This is where the famous contradiction comes in. The same people who once said, "Don't trust the system," sometimes struggled when newer generations questioned their version of it. Change was great until it threatened what they had built. Boomers are also known for their strong sense of generational pride. Because their cohort was so large and influential, many of the cultural touchstones we still reference, music, movies, movements, came from their youth. This feeds their special ability to turn nearly any conversation into a comparison with the past, often beginning with "back in my day." It's not always meant as bragging. It's a reflection of how central their experiences were to modern history. Their legacy is complicated but undeniable. They helped reshape culture, expand freedoms, and redefine self-expression, then worked to preserve what they felt had been earned. Love them or argue with them, baby boomers truly believe they changed everything. And in many ways, they're not wrong. Generation X, 1965 through 1980. Generation X grew up in the background, sandwiched between the massive presence of the baby boomers and the attention later given to millennials. Gen X learned early how to be self-sufficient. Many were latchkey kids, coming home to empty houses after school and figuring things out on their own. This independence wasn't framed as empowerment at the time. It was just how life worked. They came of age during a period when optimism started cracking. Gen X watched divorce rates rise, companies downsize, and long-promised stability quietly disappear. The idea that loyalty to institutions would guarantee security didn't match what they saw happening around them. As a result, they learned not to expect much and not to be surprised when systems failed. Cynicism wasn't a personality flaw, it was a survival skill. Culturally, Gen X lived in the transition zone between analog and digital. They grew up with MTV, arcades, cassette tapes, and early home computers, technology that required patience and troubleshooting. If something broke, you poked at it until it worked again. This made them adaptable problem solvers, long before tutorials or search engines existed. Their emotional style is defined by sarcasm and dark humor. Big speeches and exaggerated enthusiasm felt fake to them, so they responded with understatement instead. Whatever and meh weren't signs of apathy, they were shields against disappointment. Gen X tends to stay calm in chaos because chaos feels familiar. Gen X's legacy is quiet resilience. They don't usually ask for credit, attention, or applause. They just get on with it, fix what's broken, and make a joke about how none of this is that surprising anyway. Millennials, or Gen Y, 1981 through 1996, Millennials are the generation that grew up straddling two worlds, a mostly analog childhood filled with cartoons, playgrounds, and handwritten notes, and a digital adulthood defined by smartphones, social media, and constant connectivity. As kids, they were told anything was possible. They could dream big, achieve anything, and change the world. That optimism met reality when they entered adulthood, often during economic recessions, skyrocketing housing costs, and student debt crises. Suddenly, the "you can be anything" promise felt complicated. Culturally, millennials are defined by nostalgia and adaptability. They fondly remember Saturday morning cartoons, early video games, and the simplicity of pre-internet life. At the same time, they became the first generation to navigate a fully digital world, shifting how people communicate, work, and consume media. This blend of analog memory and digital fluency shaped a generation that is tech-savvy, resourceful, and often skeptical of traditional structures like malls, cable TV, and even conventional career paths. Emotionally, millennials are open and expressive. Unlike the reserved silent generation or the get-it-done greatest generation, millennials value emotional honesty, self-expression, and meaningful connections. They're often careful about commitments, sometimes prioritizing experiences, hobbies, or even plants over traditional milestones like homeownership or having kids, at least for now. Their defining sentiment is a mix of hope, frustration, and questioning. They grew up with promises of a better life, only to discover adulthood is far more expensive and uncertain than advertised. This makes them reflective, sometimes anxious, but also resilient, creative, and willing to rethink the rules. Generation Z, 1997-2012. Generation Z is the first cohort to truly grow up immersed on the internet. For them, life without screens, constant connectivity, and social media is unimaginable. They came to age in a world where global crises, climate change, political unrest, pandemics were broadcast in real time, often shaping their worldview before they even reached adulthood. If earlier generations questioned institutions or systems, Gen Z often assumes they're already broken and reacts with memes, sarcasm, and digital humor. Irony and humor define much of their communication. They use jokes as both a coping mechanism and a way to critique society. Traumatic or stressful events are often filtered through humor, turning uncertainty and anxiety into shareable cultural commentary. Their fluency with technology makes them digital natives. They learn new platforms instantly, set trends at lightning speed, and frequently teach older generations how to navigate a world built online. Culturally, Gen Z is hyper-aware and hyper-connected. They understand social, political, and environmental issues deeply, often approaching them with a mix of skepticism, activism, and online wit. Their social consciousness is paired with a realistic, sometimes fatalistic perspective about the state of the world, which fuels both creativity and caution. Despite the cynicism, Gen Z is resourceful, adaptable, and quick-thinking. They thrive in fast-paced environments, use technology to solve problems, and often find community online when offline spaces feel inadequate. Memes, tweets, and viral content aren't just entertainment. They're tools for survival, solidarity, and commentary. Generation Alpha, 2013 to 2024. Generation Alpha is the first cohort to grow up fully immersed in AI, tablets, and personalized digital experiences. For them, screens and smart devices are as natural as toys were for past generations. They interact with technology before they can even form full sentences, swiping, tapping, and asking digital assistants for answers as part of their everyday life. This constant exposure to fast, responsive systems shapes expectations. If something isn't instant, it's frustrating. They're growing up in a world of unprecedented customization and connectivity. Learning, playing, and exploring are often mediated by apps, algorithms, and interactive media, which encourages creativity, problem-solving, and adaptability. Unlike earlier generations, Generation Alpha may never experience a world without AI, voice assistants, or on-demand information. This will make them exceptionally capable, tech-literate, and likely to outsmart older generations in ways we can't fully predict. Patience isn't their strong suit, but curiosity, efficiency, and inventiveness are. They quickly understand systems, find shortcuts, and are comfortable with trial and error learning in both digital and physical worlds. Their comfort with technology isn't just practical, it shapes how they think, communicate, and imagine solutions for problems that earlier generations couldn't even foresee. Generation Alpha's legacy is already emerging. They will be the most technologically fluent, adaptable, and creative generation yet, growing up with tools and possibilities previous generations could only dream about. Generation Beta is the first cohort of kids being born into a world that's hyper-connected, hyper-automated, and constantly evolving. They're arriving just as AI, robotics, and other technologies are reshaping everything from education to entertainment to work. For them, life will feel almost like a game in beta mode, constantly updating, changing rules, and introducing new tools and experiences we can't fully imagine yet. They will face challenges that are still being defined, jobs that don't exist today, problems that current adults haven't named, and social structures that may evolve faster than anyone can keep up with. Their reality will be shaped by constant innovation, from AI companions to advanced virtual experiences, meaning their expectations and skill sets will be unlike any previous generation. Generation Beta's perspective will likely be radically different. They may question why humans do things the old way, approaching problems with creativity and logic shaped by technology from day one. While previous generations adapted to technology, Beta will be born into it, making them exceptionally fluent in navigating a world that is still loading in real time.